Heather Nemelka has always been ambitious.
When I was young, I wanted to be president of the United States.
But then, life. She met a guy her freshman year of college, married that guy her sophomore year, and quickly finished her communication degree in 3 years so she could support him through business school.
I kind of kept thinking I was going to start our family soon, and so I didn't really get into something that was like a career. I was just doing what I could do to make as much money as possible to pay off the student loans and things like that. And when I became a mom, I loved it. I was all in. My company that I was working for had asked me, are you planning on coming back? And I didn't go on maternity leave because I knew I was just going to be a full-time mom. That was what my mom did, and I knew that's what I wanted to do as well. And my intention was eventually, when my kids were all in school, I was going to then return to the workforce at that point. But until then, I was going to just, be a mom, all in.
And that's what she did. They had 5 children, and caring for them and managing her home was her more than full-time career. Until
about 10 years ago, my husband, of almost 25 years, he filed for divorce, and suddenly I had to go back into the workforce. And what I didn't know was that our financial situation was so bad that even if we hadn't gotten divorced, I would have had to go back into the workforce almost immediately. You have this plan in your mind that you think is going to be this wonderful experience and journey, and mine definitely wasn't that way.
Welcome to the Family Lab podcast, where we investigate all things parenting and home management. Today, we're talking about work and motherhood, specifically those crossroads moments when we're trying to make a shift or a change, moments of reinvention. And who better to guide us through this tricky topic than Heather Nemelka, who not only has gone through this reinvention herself, but is also helping other women do the same. She recently started her own company named Elevera with the greatest tagline, "Mothers never left the workforce, they just had a job transfer." The company offers workshops, courses, career consulting, and resume reviews for moms who are looking for a career change. She also just started a podcast, which you can find on YouTube. I've watched the first few episodes, and they are fantastic. I'll include a link for her podcast and for her website. I invited Heather on the podcast to address one of the greatest challenges I'm seeing among my own friends, as well as some of the other moms in this Family Lab community. As I started approaching 40, I noticed a growing upheaval among my friends, many of them full-time caregivers, but many with careers as well. We started on the downward slope of caregiving, where eventually we work ourselves out of a job. This is a good thing, but it leaves a hole. Suddenly, our kids aren't filling every spare minute of our time with their needs, and we start having the bandwidth to think about our own needs. This is a good thing, but it can also be kind of terrifying. I've had several friends go into full-blown midlife crises trying to figure out, again, who they are and what they want to be when they grow up. Those with existing careers started questioning whether this is still what they wanted to do. Those who'd been raising kids full-time started thinking about going back to school, going back to previous careers, or starting a side gig. Heather's going to tell us more about how she forged her career path, but I thought I'd also tell you about my career path so that you'd know where both of us were coming from in this conversation. Then we'll hear Heather's story and get her advice for moms who are trying to reimagine their careers. Like Heather, I planned that my main career would be caregiving and home management. My husband and I wanted a big family, and I was excited to run that big family. In college, I switched majors a lot because I'm interested in so many things, but I finally landed on English. I loved it. I worked as an intern at the alumni magazine at BYU, where I went to school. And then I worked as a tech writer for a while after I graduated, and then ultimately as a magazine writer. And then I moved on to become the editor of that magazine. I loved it. It was great. I did that for about 3.5 years as we were trying to start our family. Having a career that I loved really helped ease the struggle of infertility that we were having all this time, about 5 years of that. Ultimately, though, I was able to get pregnant through in vitro, and I decided to stop working full-time. So I dropped the main magazine, but I continued to be the editor of a quarterly magazine, and I just worked from home. I'd go into the office once in a while and do some travel. I could still bring the baby, and it was great. As I had more children, I had one more, and I stopped editing that magazine, and I would just edit and write a little bit on the side. By baby number 3, I was totally done with the magazine work and fully immersed in toddler and preschool land. That career path continued for the next 9 years and 2 additional babies. until suddenly my youngest started preschool. I finally had a few hours a week to myself to think about what was next, and I started a blog, which then became the How She Moms podcast. Then a couple of years ago, with all my kids in school most of the day, I went back to my roots at that first college internship, and I asked them if they might want a podcast at the magazine. And so they did. 3 months later, I was launching the Y Magazine podcast, and I've been doing that ever since. And it's actually what helps keep the Family Lab podcast running, since I am not super good on the business side and I haven't figured out how to make the Family Lab podcast make money. So I'm still trying to figure out my career and, how to make it all work and how to balance it with motherhood. I don't have everything figured out, but that's kind of how my career has gone. And I'm very grateful that I have something I'm passionate about. So I was able to kind of transition as motherhood evolved. And I've always had something I'm excited about career-wise. So I really feel blessed about that. And we'll see how it all evolves from here. But as we heard in the intro, that was not the case for Heather Nemelka, who suddenly had to find a way to support her family after her divorce.
You have this plan in your mind and it's going to be this wonderful experience and journey. And mine definitely wasn't that way. I had known that at some point I was going to return to the workforce because I had gotten a degree and I loved working and I wanted to have a career at some point, but I wanted to re-enter the workforce on my terms. I wanted to go back when it was convenient and I was going to go right into the job that I loved, and that wasn't the case at all. And so suddenly I had to provide for my family. I had 5 young kids and my husband at the time wasn't working, and it was very challenging because I needed to pay the bills. And so I immediately realized that, okay, I'm not going to have the luxury of picking the career that I thought I was going to have. I've just got to get a job. And so that was my primary motivation, was I've got to get a job and try to send out as many resumes as possible so I can get a job as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that is really tricky. So what was your first move?
So because I had to get a job right away, I immediately updated my resume, and it wasn't online because it had been so long. And so I looked at my resume and fortunately I'd had an eBay business and an Amazon business on the side that I kind of just done for fun. So I was able to put that as work experience, but I certainly hadn't worked for anyone during these 18 years of being out of the workforce. So I had applied to 80 jobs, and I hadn't heard back from any of them. And
Oh my
even
gosh.
though I graduated in communications, I was applying to jobs like receptionist, office manager, because I didn't have confidence that I could go back into communications, because I had graduated in communications with an emphasis in advertising, and everything was digital now. So I didn't feel like I could do digital advertising because I didn't know what that was. And so I fell back on some skills that I knew I could do, answering a phone, filing, things like that. But nobody even called me back or emailed me back. And I was really discouraged at that point because I'm desperate. I need to get a job.
Yeah, that's
And so I talked to my brother and I just said, Brian, what should I do? I've got to get a job. I've got to start paying the bills. And he said, well, I have some friends that are really well known in the area. They're founders of KT Tape, and you can do an informational interview with them, and then they could potentially refer you into some other companies or make introductions. So I thought that was great. And I wasn't sure what an informational interview was. And so for those who don't know what that is, it's basically you contact someone either through friends or family, somebody that you can interview, and you ask them about their job and their company. And it's not with any intention of getting a job through them. It's just to understand what it is that they do.
So you're kind of interviewing them rather than
100%.
them interviewing you. Okay.
So that interview was set up for me not to get a job, but just to talk to them. And it was interesting because they started asking me questions like, so Heather, what do you want to do? And I didn't have very good answers because I wasn't expecting to have them ask me questions. And I said, well, I graduated in communications. I think I can do advertising, but I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't really know what it is that I want to do, but I'm hardworking. I can figure things out. And fortunately they recognized that, and they said, well, which companies do you want to be referred into, or who can we make introductions with? And I gave them a list of 5, and they said, yeah, we know people at those companies, we can make introductions. So I thought, okay, this is great.
Awesome.
And I went home and didn't think much of it. And then I got an email the next day from the chief marketing officer who I had interviewed with. And he said that they would rather not make these introductions and would like to offer me a job instead. And I was thrilled and excited and just so grateful to have a job. So I was hired as a marketing coordinator, which is like the entry level job that you would have right out of college. And
Yeah.
so at first it was a little like it hurt my ego a little bit because I'm in my 40s and
Right.
I'm working
Right.
as a marketing coordinator, but
And
that's
with people who are my children's age.
oh, yes. Yeah. But you have to get what you can get. And it ended up being so great because I was able to build confidence in an entry level job and prove to them that I was impactful, that I could create value and I could do the things they needed. And then within a year, I was able to talk to the CEO and ask him about promotion and being moved up to a manager role. And I took time to write down all of the things I had done that year that showed I was doing more than my job required. And then I ended up getting the promotion to manager. So I'm a big fan of informational interviews rather than just applying to a bunch of jobs.
That's great.
So think of your
Right.
friends,
Okay.
family, former colleagues, neighbors. What you do is you find out what they do and you either interview them or you ask them to make introductions to other people that have the job that you're interested in doing, and then you ask them questions. And what's really important, I think, as women, we when we become mothers and we're out of the workforce, we forget who we were and we have to rediscover ourselves. And part of that informational interview process is learning if that's what you want to do. And you may have I've worked with women that were nurses before they became stay-at-home moms. And then they're like, Heather, I don't really want to be a nurse anymore. I've been taking care of my kids and my husband for years. I don't want to caretake or give care to people anymore. And that's a real thing, is trying to rediscover yourself. And so I think informational interviews are a great way to see if that role is even something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, I keep thinking about how it feels like such a myth that we're fed from a very young age. We ask little children, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" and expect like one answer. And I know very few people who have one answer to that over their lifespan of what they do for a career and what they want to be. So, what advice do you have for people who are trying to figure that out, maybe refigure it out after maybe they studied something in college, but it just wasn't a right fit. Beyond that informational interview, what other ideas do you have for just kind of figuring out who you are and what you want to be?
Yeah, no, I think that's super important. What I tell women is to get a journal or notebook and write down the things that make you happy. And recognize and be really aware during your day, like where do you start to feel happy? Is it taking care of your kids? Is it going on a walk and being out in nature? And or if you're on a vacation, is it, doing the travel thing? Whatever it might be, take some time to figure out what are the things that get you excited, and journal and write down what are the things you used to love to do before you became a mom, because as we know, you grow a lot as a mom and you are doing different things as a mother that can also transfer into the workplace. So I think it's time to reflect and get clear on who you are now and who you want to become. And oftentimes we as mothers have forgotten who we are, and that is a process that you have to take. You have to take the time to rediscover yourself, and journaling is a great way to write down those things, and then that will help bring clarity to what you might want to do.
That's awesome. Another thing that I've found as I've had friends going through this same kind of reinvention process, which really is what it is. So I subscribed to the Masterclass app for a
Nice.
while.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I encourage some of my friends to do is just like do a trial of that, or subscribe to that, or any other learning portal, and just see what classes strike your fancy, because and it may just be something you want to pursue as a hobby, but it might give you a clue into what interests you and what talents you might have. Just what you want to learn about can help you kind of figure out what you might want to do for a career as well.
I love that because taking classes, well, I remember I thought I wanted to learn how to do stained glass. I was going to start making stained glass and make some extra money on the side. And I took this stained glass making class, and it was not a great experience. I
Mm.
recognized that I was not good at it, and I cut myself and I didn't like it. And so I think taking some classes either online or in the community to kind of figure out what it is that yeah, what you
Yeah, just
like.
look through a course catalog and be like, I would enjoy that class. I would not enjoy that one. And even if you don't even take the
Oh,
classes,
that's a great idea.
yeah.
Just kind of see what's out there and available because and getting on the internet too and just doing some research about different jobs and roles. And now with ChatGPT, you can literally ask any of these models and ask it questions of like, these are the things that I like to do. And with Elevare, we offer a free online assessment that is like a motivators assessment, and companies use it. But this organization that has lent us this assessment for free for our moms, companies will use this assessment to find out what motivates their employees so they can make sure that they're doing the jobs that they're most motivated to do.
Yeah.
And so what I encourage women to do is take this assessment to kind of figure out like what makes them motivated, what gives them, passion, where do they get excited? And that can be really helpful. But I love the idea of just go through a class, a course and find out what's available. That's a brilliant idea.
So, as a stay-at-home mom, I learned so many skills that I know absolutely apply in the workforce. I was a magazine editor before I had kids, and so I had experience managing people and things like that. That pales in comparison to the organizational and management skills I've had to learn as a mother, but I feel like some of that is so undervalued and hard to describe. How do you counsel moms to frame their experience as mothers, or maybe, volunteering at schools, things like that, so that it is tangible for an employer?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge with women that have become mothers and have been stay-at-home moms is they can't see the value that they have, all the experiences that they've had, what they've been doing day in and day out as a mother completely transfers into the workforce. So I talk about mom skills and work skills. And for example, you've been planning your children's birthday parties or you've done homeroom mom kind of things where you've had parties or a family reunion, you are an event planner.
Yeah.
If you've been budgeting your family finances and paying bills, you are financially like doing accounting and those kind of things. If you've been resolving conflicts with your children, they might be fighting, that's conflict resolution. When you've been trying to get your kids go to bed, that you're trying to negotiate, okay, you've got this bedtime, will you do this and that? And that's negotiation. Time management, managing all these different things throughout the day. All of these different things are, time management issues.
Yeah.
The project management, where you've got all of these different tasks that you're doing, those are all considered projects. So employers don't recognize those unless you put those on your resume. So, for example, I tell women that are returning to the workforce to put on their resume their experience, not work experience, but experience. And that can be listed out like all the different things. So, thinking about maybe some of the things you've done, maybe you did a fundraiser with the school and PTA, maybe you did a book fair, maybe you did something at your church where you had a leadership position and you had to organize 200 people or whatever it might be. Quantifying the things you did, meaning putting a number behind the results, is going to be really huge. So for example, I did book fairs with the PTA, and so I said increased book fair volunteers by 30% because the year before we had 5 moms, and then it increased when I did the book fair,
Awesome.
and then raised X amount of dollars for the school. So an employer can look at that and go, oh, okay, I can see how that transfers into the workforce. But you're 100% right, where a lot of women don't see the skills that they've acquired as a mom being transferable to the workforce. And it's on the mom to put it into the resume as a work experience. And so all of these things that I talk about, they transfer over very easily. It's just that women don't always see it that way.
Yeah. So what does that look like on a resume? Or like say I was involved in a remodel of my basement and that
Yeah.
takes a lot of management skills. Do you just put that like as a project
Yes,
on your
yes. So
resume?
you can organize it as like, project based. So you could
Yeah.
put, I love that you gave that as an example because that's a perfect example. Managed, a contractor, met deadlines or efficiencies or things like that that you did. And again, I love getting online and either using Google or ChatGPT or whatever it might be to find out what, if you did a project like this, what are the most obvious results and tasks that I would have accomplished. And then you can, put those down in bullets. But I love that. Or if you happen to have some graphic design experience and you helped a neighbor do some, flyers or baby shower design or things like that, you can talk about I created the design and the layout, and I worked with in the printing office to work on the whatever it might be. Project base is really the way to go. And the other thing that's great about that is if you have any volunteer experience or you have education experience that you maybe took an online course or things like that, again, it's very easy then to put, you've got your experience at the top after you have your profile summary at the very, very top. And then you can have education as like anything you've learned, any courses you've taken, and then volunteer experience, you can have that as well. But project based is the way to go.
That's so great. Yeah, because I mean, I just picture somebody just staring at this blank page like, what on earth do I, how do I encapsulate all the things I do onto this and communicate like how much I've grown? I just see all these amazing moms doing amazing things. But if you're going to be going into the workforce and trying to communicate this, it can be really hard.
And very kind of discouraging because you think, well,
Yeah.
I've just been a mom. I hate that term, but I used it all the time. I would say I'm just a mom. And the things that mothers do with so much going on, it's amazing. And I always tell employers, like, mothers are the best to employ because they've been dealing with all of these challenging activities and children that don't want to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
running an organization. It was an interesting mind shift when I realized, like, oh, I am the leader of an organization and I'm going to treat it as such. It made a big difference in my confidence and in my skill set.
I love that.
So you became the manager of this marketing department. Where did you go from there?
So during this time of trying to become a manager, I just took on more responsibilities, which really taught me a lot and helped me build confidence. And during this time, I had a strong impression I needed to go back to school and get my MBA. And I had no time. This was like the craziest thing ever. And there were some things that went into it that really made it an amazing experience. But I got my MBA. And when I got my MBA, I knew I wanted to try to get into tech. But I couldn't get a job in tech because I didn't have, I guess, what it took, or I didn't have tech experience, whatever it might be. So I got a job working for another company doing field marketing. And so I was doing a lot of product marketing and general marketing, event marketing, all of those at KT Tape. And so then I pivoted a little bit to do field marketing. And I was able to hire a team and I started working and doing that. And I was going to school every other weekend.
Oh
And
boy.
yeah, it was
And
crazy.
still being in charge of your own home
Yeah.
organization,
Yep.
your
Mom of
family.
5 kids trying
Yeah.
to do it. But they were really supportive and I grew and developed a lot during that time. But I still wanted to get into tech. And so I decided I was going to do all the things that would make me look like I was hireable in tech. So I took a coding class that was just a local class. I started going to tech conferences. I started talking to people in tech. I asked them questions. I volunteered to write an article for the Silicon Slopes magazine and tried to do all of the things that would show I had a passion about tech. And then when I finished my MBA program, my company asked me what my plans were, and I wanted to move up in the company and become a leader, and they just didn't have those levels in the organization. And so I kind of knew that I needed to consider leaving the company, which I didn't want to do, but I did want to get into tech. And through a series of interviews. Then I ended up getting hired or for a tech company in a role for field marketing there. And I graduated from my MBA program and started doing tech field marketing activities and events. And then COVID hit in 2020. And since my team had done events and events were no longer, the team was let go. And it was a super big shock to my confidence. And I thought, man, why didn't they keep me and stuff? And then I ended up getting hired by Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud computing arm of Amazon. And so I ended up doing field marketing for them and working remotely. And that was such a blessing to be able to work remotely and be able to be a mom here at home.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a job working remotely for a different company. And I've just recently left that company to do my nonprofit full time. And it's been a real change, and I've grown and developed during this time and gained confidence in different areas. But my career journey has been nothing like I thought it would be at all.
Okay, so let's talk about what inspired you to start Elevair.
So when I returned to the workforce and I started, getting jobs and things like that, I would have women reach out to me occasionally and just say, hey, I know you returned to the workforce after a career gap. Can we talk? And I would, or people would refer me, refer their family or friends to me, either on LinkedIn, or they would get my email and they'd just say, hey, my sister just got divorced. Would you talk to her? Or my mom is thinking of getting back into the workforce because, all of us are all grown up. What advice can you give her? And so I loved that. I loved having conversations with a mom and just saying, what do you love? What are some of your thoughts? How can I help you with your resume? And so I was helping these women get back into the workforce just for fun because I loved it. And when I got back into the workforce, I didn't have anybody to help me. And there weren't resources and trainings and things like that. I just had to figure it out on my own. And so I knew I wanted to help women figure it out. And for a while, I was just doing it for fun on the side. And then about a year and a half ago, I was talking to my cousin and telling him that I wanted to make more of an impact. And he actually had told me that what I was doing, helping moms on the side, could really make a difference in in other people's lives. And I just needed to scale me. And so that's what I decided to do. And I formed this nonprofit 501c3 called the Elevair Foundation, and I started doing just trainings and a summit and online workshops and in-person workshops to help women learn how to create a resume, interview, a LinkedIn profile, how to write a cover letter, how to dress, all of the things, build confidence. I've been doing an in-person workshop on building confidence, and that has brought me so much enjoyment. And now I've formed a business model with the LLC so that I can have that fund the nonprofit. So that's kind of how it came about. And it's been such a great journey. And when you find your thing, your purpose outside of motherhood, it is a beautiful thing, because all of a sudden you realize that Heavenly Father has given you gifts that you didn't know that you had, and He wants you to use them. And so I think that's why I had to go through the challenges that I had to go through so that I could help more women. So.
Well, and I think a lot of us think or hope it's going to be this straight shot. You took a circuitous path to find this passion, and you had to learn things along the way to get there, and learn things about yourself, I'm sure, too.
And years, right?
Yeah.
To your point, you do different things, you try different things, and you don't know, back to this point of rediscovering yourself, you really don't know who you are when you have been giving so much to your children. Mm-hmm. And this period of rediscovery is really a beautiful thing, and it's a journey. And if you'll embrace the journey and recognize that it's all about becoming the person you were always meant to be, and being a mother has contributed to that, and those talents and skills that you've developed over time are going to serve you so well, and the organizations that you will serve if you return to the workforce, and certainly will bless you to be a better wife and mother as you build confidence, because then you'll be able to transfer that confidence into what you do in the home, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I keep thinking about how unique the career of I struggled a long time to figure out what to call myself as a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
And what I eventually settled on, I still use that term, but what I kind of settled on is I'm a caregiver and home manager,
I
because
love
those
that.
are kind of the two arms of what I do. And then I have the podcast too, which kind of emerged as I went into different stages, but that's kind of a unique thing about that career as both a caregiver and a home manager, is that it naturally evolves yourself out of a job, because your children grow up and change stages and need you less and less, and your home management responsibilities diminish as well as you grow. So it's this weird job where you're actively working yourself out of a job as time passes. And so I feel like there's been a part, and it's different for every woman, but I've had lots of friends with the same career path that have stayed home with their kids. And then there's this point at which they just start feeling lost and they don't
Yes.
know what's ahead. I just want to help them so bad. So I understand your passion and what you're doing, because I feel the same way. I was lucky enough or blessed enough to, I had this writing career, and I knew I wanted to continue writing. So I started a blog, and then I was able to morph it into a podcast, and kind of as my children were becoming more independent, I was able to just gradually grow this and have it be a passion for me. But I've seen so many friends who haven't been able to find that passion or know what they're interested in.
Well, I first of all, stay-at-home moms, I hate that word because moms
Yeah,
do
it's
not stay at home.
terrible. I know. I
When
know.
were you ever just staying at home, like eating bonbons on the couch, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if and I know that term is used because stay at home is an easy way to say, oh, you're doing things in the household, right? So I
Right.
understand why
Right.
whoever came up with that term. But I think there's a process that all women who have become mothers have to figure out and find themselves again, because there is a lot of growth as becoming a mom, and all of the wonderful things you've done are super important, and that dedication to that mom role has made such a difference in the life of your children and in your husband's life and in the household generally, that when your kids start to leave the nest, or when they're all in school and you don't have them asking you questions constantly, and you're all of a sudden having to find your identity again.
Yeah.
And as a mother, it's easy to say, I'm a mom. That's my identity. I'm a mom. But once your children don't need you anymore, you become less of a mom, and you want to become yourself again, your true self. And
Yes.
it may be working a job part-time, or it may be volunteering at the school, or doing something outside of being a mother that can give you some fulfillment, because I think that's also really important. Because I don't know about you, but I found I was very fulfilled as a mom. I loved being a
Yeah,
mom,
totally.
right?
Totally.
Like, it
Yeah.
was a great thing.
Yeah.
But when you aren't needed as much, you lose that sense of fulfillment. And I think it's important to find that fulfillment again. And it's a process. It takes some time. And talking to other women and finding, like talking to you, and you have this podcast, and tell me about that. What do you like? What do you not like? And finding something. It doesn't even have to be necessarily returning to the workforce. You could just
Yeah.
be finding something that gives you excitement and happiness. And I hate to use the word passion, because passion makes it sound like you've got to be like, woo, just feel so excited. But something that makes your
Right.
foot pat, something that you get excited to do, hopefully every day outside of motherhood, I think is really important, because otherwise, when your kids all leave the nest, you're going to feel very lost, and you're going to be resentful. And I don't think any woman wants to feel resentful of all of the time that they've given to running a household and being a mother.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like maybe finding pockets of time all along the way
Oh,
to
brilliant.
nurture some of that is really important too. So it's not just like, oh, now what? Like
Yeah.
if you've been trying things along the way, then have some ideas already.
You are so right. But Whitney, that's something that if any mothers who are listening are like me, you put yourself last. Like
Yeah.
everybody else's classes, their whatever they, clothing, whatever it is, you sacrifice what your needs are for your families. And but you hit the nail on the head is that finding something to do all throughout being a mom is really important, and taking time for yourself is ultimately what's going to actually bless your family. And I didn't do that. I was all in and I didn't feel like I was important enough. I didn't feel like I needed it. And my kids needed their things more than I did. And that's actually not a good thing. I actually recommend now to women, take time for yourself. Do some things that you can get excited. Do some things that are going to fill your bucket, because we do so much better when we serve from a full place. What is that saying? You can't pour from an empty bucket.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we as women can tend to get our bucket really low and not have anything left to give to ourselves after we've poured into everybody else. And I'd like to change that. And I love that you have done that. You're a great example of somebody that's been doing something all along.
Well, I mean, it's hard to imagine it going any other way because I was just so, I just felt this call to
Strong
write. I
call.
was writing along the way, like about what I was doing. I guess I'm blessed that my passion and my career path have aligned all along the way.
So true.
Um, but but yeah, I think especially in those early young really needy stages, what moment would I fit that in? But also, like, I didn't realize until my kids were a little bit older that we can use each other as resources so much. If you have three friends who want to do a babysitting swap or something like that, I used to do it with two friends, and then we would just do it on Wednesdays or something like that, and we would have I would have 2 out of 3 Wednesdays where I could do whatever I wanted. At first, I felt guilty ever getting a babysitter if it wasn't for like a specific appointment or something I had to do. And once I gave myself permission to get a babysitter for doing something for myself, it was a game changer and it opened up a whole new dimension of my life.
You know, you have hit the nail on the head there too, because I think yeah, we hate to do anything for ourselves, right? Unless it's like serves a purpose, right? And
Yeah.
I love the idea of like the babysitting swap. I did that too. I did it with 4 other moms, and we would just, swap, and it gave us time to do something for ourselves. Something that I tried to do when I had young kids is I would put them down for quiet time. So let's say they gave up their naps and they were no longer napping, they would have quiet time in their bedroom for an hour, and they could read books, they could do whatever in their bedroom, but it was quiet time, and they were also supposed to stay on their bed ideally, and they could read books on their bed, and they could play with their dolls on their bed or whatever. But the idea would be is if they were tired enough, they would actually take a nap and hopefully get a nap in. But it gave me an hour of time that I could just do whatever. And I know that that may not work for everybody, but I remember thinking I didn't even have 15 minutes for myself during the
Yeah.
day.
There's this temptation to fill that with more work. There's this temptation to like be, okay, well now I can get those dishes done. And just giving yourself permission to be like, the dishes can wait. I'm important. It's all about priorities. Like, okay, I am worth this time, and I'm going to choose how I fill it, and whether it's getting some rest or pursuing an interest, you know what you need if you look inside.
I do think that mothers typically don't see their needs, and you're such a better mother and a better wife and a better household manager when you actually do some things for yourself. And I didn't always do that. I wasn't always good about that, but I've gotten much better over time. Thank goodness.
I feel like we've we've covered well some of the experiments that you have tried, just as you were just trying different jobs and things like that. Is there anything else you'd like to say about things that you tried in that time period that either worked or didn't work?
Yeah, I think something that a lot of women, and certainly men too, but mostly women struggle with is this lack of confidence. And so when I was returning to the workforce, I didn't have any confidence at all. And certainly as I've gone to new jobs and things like that, I've had to rebuild confidence. And so I'm a big believer in doing different things that help you build that confidence. And I believe that confidence requires evidence. And so if you don't have the evidence top of mind of the things that you've done, it's hard to feel confident. And so what I like to give as examples of things that I've done is I like to try to keep track of the hard things that I've done that can give me the confidence. And I just put it on a piece of paper so it's not hidden in a journal that I might lose. But listing like hard conversations that I've had or things that I've accomplished, whether it's as a child or in college or whatever, but just capturing all of the things that I've done. Maybe it's moving to a new state and having to make new friends. Those kind of things all build confidence when you can see, oh yeah, I have done these really hard things. And then over time, it starts to be this reservoir of confidence that you can look back to, and it will help you continue on this journey. And something else that has been really great for me too is this concept of positive affirmations. And I remember thinking when somebody would suggest that before that was just hokey and made no sense. And during COVID, when I was working for Amazon Web Services, I got COVID and I got this really bad brain fog, and I was having a difficult time communicating. I couldn't put my thoughts together, and I was feeling very challenged, and I lost a lot of confidence during that time because I wasn't the person who I had been.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm desperate. What can I do? And I relearned about positive affirmations. And so I created a list of positive affirmations and just typed them up on the computer and printed them out, and I put a copy of them by my computer monitor and also in my bedroom on my mirror. And that way I could repeat these statements, these present statements that even though at the time when I first made them, I didn't feel like that described me, having these positive statements to say every day over time made me feel more confident and helped me realize that I actually was this person. So to start out, my positive affirmations were, I am confident, I am smart, I am capable, I am creative, I am kind, all these things that would build me up. And so then when I was having a hard day, I would look back at this and be like, no, I am actually really capable. I am, whatever it is. And it's important to say it like with feeling when you say it. And at first when you say it, you're like, I was kind of laughing when I would say it.
Right.
I was
You feel
laughing
silly.
thinking, I'm not smart. I'm not. And then as I continue to say it, like your mind starts to believe it. And this has been proven with psychology that if you can feel it and say it out loud and vocalize it, and saying it in the mirror for whatever reason also helps strengthen it. And I think these positive affirmations made all the difference for me when I had some really low points. So I encourage women to do that. It's free. It doesn't take very much time. And then pretty soon it can always be in your mind. And so when you're having a moment of anxiety or you're not feeling capable, you can recite those in your mind and it can help you get through it. So those are my two ideas. When we have confidence, we can actually decide to go back in the workforce or go back to school or start a business or strike up a conversation. I think confidence breeds some beautiful things, and when we feel confident, we're better mothers, better caretakers, and I think everybody benefits when we have confidence.
Absolutely. Okay, so the experiments that I would suggest for our listeners is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Either go to your community college and look at the classes that are offered there, or look at something like Masterclass, or there are a lot of different course offerings. I used to do the Great Courses, which I think you can get on Audible now.
Yes, I
And
actually have CDs from them.
yes, that's when I started too. I as a young mom, that was like one of my saving graces, is to have some classes that I was taking while I was, doing dishes or whatever. Even looking through podcasts that might teach you something, but
Oh,
take
brilliant.
some kind of a class and just start activating that part of your mind again, like learning something new, and let your imagination go wild, like something that you may not have even had any education in or any interest in. If it catches your fancy, just pursue it, and just kind of pursue tangents until you find something that lights you up. So that would be
I
the experiment I recommend.
Yeah, I think experimenting with podcasts is such a great idea. And women spend a lot of time in the car driving to practice and soccer games and whatever it might be. And it's a great place to get educated during this time. And so listening to a podcast is such a great way to learn from other people, and you deserve that. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And then my other challenge is just I've gone down the rabbit hole of listening to the Elevator podcast. And
Oh,
so
yes.
so that's another experiment, is just to start listening to this, and you know, practicing some of these ideas that Heather's been talking about. And there is such a treasure trove of information already on this very young podcast that she's started. I highly recommend it. I've learned a lot already from listening to you, so I
Oh,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. I think doing hard things, like starting a podcast, is not easy, as you already know. But doing hard things helps us feel like, okay, I can do other hard things. And it's so fun to rediscover ourselves through doing the hard things. And we don't know until we've tried it to see, oh, okay. And also I love podcasts generally because you can get access to all different ideas, all different
And
people
yeah, so
at your
many
time.
experts.
You
Yeah.
can listen to them at fast speed. You know,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
great.
and there are so many tasks involved in motherhood that lend themselves to podcast listening. And sometimes you just want an escape and entertainment, and I get that. But if you pepper that in with some education, just to explore your interests and see what captivates your imagination.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much out there, and I think we deserve to give ourselves that time to find what we love and do more of it. Because being a mother is amazing and wonderful, and I will never talk bad about my time as a mother. I mean, definitely challenging at moments, but being a mother was such a great blessing. But it's a wonderful time to be finding yourself again and think about, okay, what's out there? Who am I supposed to still become outside of motherhood? And podcasts are a great way to go.
So I have a lot of moms come to me and say that they feel a lot of pressure to have a side gig or to have a career when they're right in the thick of motherhood. They're like, this is all I can handle, because it is, as we know, more than a full-time job to do both caregiving, home management, hold all those pieces together. Um, some of them don't even really want a side gig, but they feel like, well, all these women are doing these amazing things. What advice do you have for those moms?
I think it's important to find purpose in whatever you do. And whether it's being a mom all in and you don't have anything on the side, if you're getting purpose out of that, that's exactly what you should be doing. I know some women who wanted to be a mom but couldn't be a mom, and so they found purpose outside of motherhood. And then there
Yeah.
are definitely friends of mine that don't want to have anything on the side. I think that what's important is to not compare ourselves to other mothers that we see, because maybe some of those women that have gone back to work, whether full time or part time, maybe that is their purpose. Maybe that is what they were supposed to do, and they're doing a great job. While they've got these side gigs or whatever it happens to be, but not ever put ourselves down for choosing a different path, because we all have our own path, and it's important to find where that path is and where it's going to take you, and follow it if that's where you feel like you're supposed to go. I think we do a lot of comparison of ourselves with other women in our circles, and I think if we would stop comparing ourselves to other moms who seem like they're doing it all, right? That diminishes what our purpose is. And maybe our purpose is just to give all of our attention and love and time to our families and build them up. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you want to be a stay-at-home mom and be all in, or you want to start something on the side or go back to school or find yourself again, recognize that you're going to find the right thing for you and not to compare yourself to the women that are around you.
Oh, thank you for that so much. That is great advice. And I think we underestimate sometimes the importance of what that models for our children is when we're pursuing our interests. It gives them permission to do the same and maybe some ideas and and just, helps them see that motherhood is a fulfilling role.
Really,
Like
it
we want
is.
to
Yeah.
make this look like an appealing thing to our children too. Like not like your life ends when you become a mother.
And I think that's really important because we want our children, we want to model happiness, right?
Yeah.
We want to be happy in our role. Now, that's not to say that we can't have bad days. I definitely have had bad days as a mother and I've had to have some good cries. But I think we can find happiness wherever we are. And it's on us to find what that looks like. And it might be rocking our baby to sleep. It might be helping our child with their science fair project. And it might be, coming home after a hard day's work and trying to throw dinner together and hearing about our kids' day while we're fixing dinner. I think we're so blessed as women to have options. We can figure out what's good for us
Yeah.
and our families.
Yeah. Well, this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you, Whitney. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Family Lab podcast. I am including a whole list of podcast episodes about motherhood and work because I've done a lot of those over the last 6 years. Some of them include how she dismantles the mommy wars, what she calls herself, how Ashley Freehan works from home, how she outsources, and a whole series about pursuing passions, starting with how she identifies her passions and then going into different case studies, including a painter, flamenco dancers, a community organizer, really just exceptional women. Thanks to my wonderful assistant, Bailey Blake, and also a big congratulations because she's about to graduate from high school. And as always, a special thanks to my mother, Susan Singley, for not only being a great mom, but for recording the theme music to my podcast. She used to play this song all the time when we were growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.